This is GadgetStop321. In today's video, I'm going to take a look at a couple of pens that I have inked up. I just recently finished up all the ink in my Lamy logo and my TWSBI Mini. And in the TWSBI Mini, I had Diamine Earl Grey. Actually, I had a special formula of it, a special mixture. I had some Diamine Earl Grey. I don't have any empty sample vials. In fact, I only have one sample vial and it's got ink in it. But, so I used this little, the only thing I had in the house, a little honey jar to mix up some Diamine Earl Grey and some of Vanessa's White Lightning. It's an ink additive. I don't know, maybe it's an ink lubricant. It helps the ink get flowing because I've had trouble finding a pen that would work well with Diamine Earl Grey. It just seems so dry. It's unpleasant to use. And my TWSBI Mini with a fine nib was the first pen that I found that just really is a pleasure to use. I don't notice the ink being dry at all. So I just finished that up. And in my continuing quest to find pens that work well with the Diamine Earl Grey, I've got my Pilot Custom 74 with a fine nib. It has just a super smooth nib, and there's a little bit of bounce to it. But it tends to write a little bit dry, but it's not noticeable because the nib is so smooth. So I'm curious to see how it works with the Diamine Earl Grey, which when I tested it, this is not a really wet writer either. It just has a really smooth nib. So I've got it inked up, but I haven't tried it yet. And I've also got this wooden pen that my sister got me just not long after I got into fountain pens. She got me this wooden pen at I think a craft fair or something like that. A local craftsman in the area where she used to live made this, and it's got a medium nib, and the branding on it is something like Mayacom, which sounds like a telecommunications company, but it's a medium nib. It's a pretty two-tone nib. I had just gotten into fountain pens, and when I opened this up that Christmas, I was just in awe. So I like to ink it up with Colorverse Interstellar Space, which is kind of a mossy green. And the set of inks that it came in was this limited edition Voyager 1. A lot of the inks in this set are some of my fall favorites. Now the pale blue dot, that's just a good year-round, it's an interesting color blue. So these two need to be cleaned out. I'll set them off to the side. And I'll take a look. Let's take a look at these two. It's been a while since I used this wooden pen. And I can't remember exactly how smooth it writes, so we will see. I do post this. It's got the threads back here. They're dark threads, so it's not, noticeable really that they're threads. They're kind of interesting looking. It makes the pen a little, or actually it makes it a lot back heavy. This cap is really heavy. It's got a lot of metal in it. But I just like the way it looks posted, and I just like to post my pens. Oh, I didn't bring my glasses, but I'll try to do this through the viewfinder. I'm just going to call this my, I need to zoom in a little more so you can see the ink. There's feedback, but it's not scratchy. Just, I would call it feedback. Not glassy smooth. And what, this is Interstellar Space. I think I spelled that wrong. Interstellar, AR, yeah. And let's see. Decently wet, not super wet, but just well tuned. Now, this is a cartridge converter pen, and I just use, actually, I was going to say I don't think I own a standard international converter, but I do. I have one that came with, a couple of them that came with my gin house. But ever since I've had this set of inks, this Interstellar Space, I was kind of concerned about it at first, because the ink, I don't know, almost looks kind of chunky. It just, the viscosity of it, or the, I don't know, the surface tension, something about it is just, it's a weird looking ink. And so I just use an ink syringe and ink up a used cartridge. I've got a little bag full of various cartridges, Standard International and Lamy and Sailor and whatnot. And I'm starting to have trouble finding ones that fit in here tightly. When you reuse cartridges, they don't last forever. You've got to make sure before you put ink in it that it's got a nice tight fit and it's not going to come loose. But I'm going to use this pen for grading. It's kind of an unusual ink. It's not super bright. It's not going to jump out. But yeah, for a week, it'll be a fun pen to use. And I can use it for taking notes as well. Now, this is the one I've been interested in. And this is a fine 14 karat nib. Yeah. Writes pretty fine, but it's not scratchy at all. Now, in both of these pens, yeah, it's a decent amount of wetness. The sample of Earl Grey that I'm using has that white lightning in it, so I'm curious to try both of these pens at some point with ink that does not have the white lightning in it. Yeah, that's going to be nice for taking notes. Let's see. I'm going to go back to a page that has the TWSBI. Let's look at these two side by side. So, yeah, they both put down a pretty good amount. Let's see. Yeah, similar wetness. The Custom 74 has this tendency, let me see. You notice on upstrokes, it puts down a finer line. And I've noticed that in other people's videos. It's just a characteristic of the nib and feed combo. I'm not sure, you know, something with how it transmits the ink on the upstroke. It puts down a less ink. But that's interesting. I like that. Let's see. So, and one thing that someone mentioned in my video about Diamine Earl Grey is that when they have an ink that behaves oddly, maybe is not saturated enough, they'll leave the lid off for a little while. Well, I haven't left the lid off of this, but it's just got this cork stopper, so I don't know how much of the ink has evaporated out of this, or if any has, or what effect that has on how the ink behaves, but I am content and happy to use Diamine Earl Grey in this pen. So now I've got two options. This puts down a little bit finer line than the TWSBI Fine. So that gives me some options. Let me see. I want to go back to this one more time. Yeah, it's hard. Usually I film these videos when there's some natural daylight coming in the window. It's really hard to tell the difference between these two, but this one's a mossy green and this one's a gray. But that is what I'm going to be putting in my pen case. Let me see. This will be my grading pen with the mossy green. Now, this is going to be kind of a tight fit. This one's a fatter pen, and this one is, the Custom 74 is a longer pen, so they just barely fit in there, but that will work. And I will probably, I guess I'll leave the purple in here in case I need to make some notes that stand out a little bit more. But that's what I'm going to be using this week. And if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.